So good morning. I'm gonna start just talking while I walk. I'm starting to go into the office every day now, so I'm gonna be seeing patients, so I'm not gonna be doing rallies and protests, and I've been really trying to figure out like how I can talk, just how I can have an impact around Black Lives Matters and that sort of thing. So I'm going to attempt to just start with talking a little bit about just my experience with color, with being white, and I'm going to start from like my child perspective and try to speak from my point of view at that time, and then hopefully get to a point where I can speak my narrative in a way in which is different from what I knew then. So I was born in Idaho, a small town in Idaho. And when I was born in 1979, I was a month overdue, but my first nickname was actually Casper. The neighbor lady down the road from our house, she was a block down the road, and she was a Mexican lady, and she gave me the name Casper. And she gave me this name because I was like really, really white. I was really, really fair skinned, blue-eyed, and the hair that I had was actually white. I was a bit of a towhead, and so Casper was like my first nickname, I guess that's the first time I started to be seen as white, I guess, in my understanding of white. I don't really remember a lot of my childhood, actually. For whatever reason, I seem to have blocked it out. But what I do remember are little bits and pieces. I used to, let's see, so where do I want to go from here? So Casper was my first nickname. And then I used to get called Whitey when I was in the 6th grade from the bully. Again, I was a towhead. I've always been super fair, super blue-eyed. And I don't remember, I just don't remember a lot of things. I remember my parents told me this. It's so weird. A part of me feels really nervous about sharing this for some reason. I don't know why, but my parents told me when I was young, because I grew up in a small town in Idaho, less than 3,000 people. And there was one black family in town. And my parents were really close with this family, and so were we as kids. We had that was a time when I was really into He-Man, and me and the older son, we'd always trade our He-Man with each other. Anyway, the thing that I wanted to say about that is my parents said when I first met T, that I was like a very I guess I was a very clean kid. Like, I didn't get to get touched, and I was always just, I was just really clean. The first time I met T, I was I kind of was, I don't know if scared was the word, but I wasn't comfortable with him touching me. And my mom was like, "What is wrong with you?" And from that point of view, I said, "He's dirty, his hands are dirty." Not really thinking too much about it. And honestly, I don't remember how old I was when this happened, but I remember that, I guess, being the first time I acknowledged a person of different color than my own. As I said, I don't really remember a lot in grade school and junior high, or grade school actually, but now in high school. Good morning, Jason. Let's see, so my last name is Quintana, which some people might wonder what that is. And so I'm actually Mexican. My grandfather is from Mexico. He is very, he looks Mexican. He's got dark skin, dark brown skin, and brown eyes, dark hair. And my grandmother, so that's my dad's dad, but my dad's mom was Irish, so she was super fair skinned. She had red hair, and again, blue eyes, and super, super fair skin. And then my mother, she is German and Irish, so she's just as white as my dad is, I guess, or as fair as my dad is, except for she doesn't have any red and she's got no ginger in her, whereas my dad does. Growing up, I burnt really bad. Shit, I don't even know why I'm sharing all this stuff, but I just figured I would give it a shot. So good morning, Cannon. So I would burn really, really bad because my skin was so fair, and I lived with blisters all over my nose and the tops of my heads and my ears and my shoulders. And I used to have to wear big, oversized t-shirts all the time. I wasn't allowed to not have my shirt on outside because I would burn. And this has really nothing to do with what I thought I was going to be talking about, but it was definitely a really challenging thing for me. And I guess the other aspect that I was going to share too is that I guess, my experience with I grew up in a very poor very poor family. Lived in a trailer house most of my life. When I was young, I lived in a trailer house with my parents, who lived next door to my grandma and grandpa, my mom's parents, who in their trailer. And then the trailer on the other side of us was my aunt and her family. And that's just kind of what we did. We grew up in trailers. And I was really embarrassed about this. In a lot of ways, I think that people would label me and my family white trash. I never had those words, I think, growing up, but I definitely, I think I felt that. I felt like that everyone else in town saw us as just not like them. We weren't Mormon either, so that was a big kind of X against us. My dad had a not so great reputation in town, and I don't know, it was just a thing. And so I always struggled with just being who I was and where I was from, and being a part of the family that I was a part of. And I was so conflicted because aesthetically I didn't want to be a part of my family, but my family taught me generosity and caring and kindness. They were the kindest people. We hardly had much, but every holiday we gave away our stuff. We gave away food. We did all this sort of stuff. We always were taught that there were people who needed more than what we did. So I had a really hard time with, I don't know if hard, it just feels so weird. I'm just trying to share again from my perspective growing up, and I'm going to try to just do that and not try to correct it. But that's how I experienced it. One of the first things I did was I couldn't wait to get a job so I could make money, so I could buy cool kids clothes, like clothes that weren't hand-me-downs and weren't clothes that somebody else wore or weren't bought at King's or that sort of thing. Anyway, I don't know, talking about a lot of different things, but race and color was not necessarily anything we talked about. Like I said, we had one black family in town, was our friends growing up. They left probably when I was still in grade school. Being Mexican, but not looking Mexican, and then also not being raised Mexican, as in the culture. My father wasn't raised in the culture. His father left when he was young, and he had a lot of he just never had an opportunity, I guess, to get to know the Mexican part of him through his father. But I have an uncle who changed his last name from Quintana. My understanding at that time as a kid was that he did that because he didn't want to be confused as being Mexican, because he was brown-eyed and dark-haired. And my dad's siblings actually look like they are Mexican, unlike my father. And so there was definitely this distance that we made toward that. Like, I don't know. Again, it was like a lot of just trying to not be, I don't know, just be seen differently than what we might have been. I wouldn't say that my family, I don't know, there was just a different, feeling really nervous about talking about this. Like, afraid of like what people might think, what's important, what's not important. But again, I'm just trying to share you from my point of view as a kid. I remember growing up, there were moments when the N-word was used, and it was never directed at a person directly. It was always like around, there was a type of nut that many people refer to as the N-word toe. And then my parents had this stew that they made they said the N-word first and then called it a stew. And I knew from right on that like I said, it wasn't directed toward people, but it still wasn't all right. And there was a part of me that knew that. And I would fight with my parents about it as I got older. And I remember getting to a point where we could agree on the point that it was an African-American stew, not a N-word stew, and like somehow that was better. Now I can realize that even just calling it an African-American stew was still racist because it was about, it was basically made from like, quote unquote, like later I would have heard people call it as poor people's stew, because it would just be like ground hamburger and maybe whatever we might have had in the fridge. So I guess there was that understanding around, I guess, blackness. Again, wasn't really exposed to it much growing up. But around brownness, I do recall that, like, growing up, I knew that because my skin wasn't brown and I wasn't seen as Mexican, that the assumptions that people made for me were different. The assumed of Mexicans were that the girls would get pregnant at 13 or 14, they would drop out of school, and the boys would drop out of school young as well, be fathers, and work in the fields. And that was just kind of the narrative, if you will, of what it meant to be brown from my point of view growing up. And our family, I think, tried to distance themselves from being connected to that. And we had the privilege to do that because we were white. And in a lot of ways, we weren't Mexican because we didn't have the culture either. But I remember when it came to graduating high school, because I had worked really, really hard to try to, get some sort of scholarship or something, because we were poor. It was the only way I could get to college. Nobody in my family, I had one aunt who got to go to college a few years before me, but other than that, like my parents, they didn't even finish high school, either one of them. And so it was like something that I was trying to do, but didn't know how to do. And there was an option that I could have said I was Mexican. And at the time I thought, I was encouraged to do it, but then I said, no, I didn't, because I felt like the Mexican experience was not my experience like I saw it was for other people. And I saw that other people that society where I grew up thought less of them, and for them to go beyond that would be harder. I know it's kind of whatever, but I think a lot of us, wherever we grow up, we're told these are the kinds of things that we can do, or that these are the things that we can't do, and that can kind of like, how does society view us, as white trash in a trailer, going to college or was like a big deal. Leaving town at some point was like a big thing. It just wasn't common. You get married, you move next to mom and dad, and you pop out some kids, and that's kind of like how the town populates. So I chose not to click Mexican or on my college applications because I didn't feel like it was appropriate. So I went off to school in Arizona. I moved out to Phoenix, Arizona, where I went to a tech school, actually, to study architectural drafting. And this was one of the first times that I realized, I guess that I had a stereotyped and biased idea of Black people, partially because I wasn't raised and brought up around Black folks. So all I knew was what I saw on TV and such as I was older. And I remember having a realization, because I've always been like somewhat of an empath, and I think I've been somewhat aware, or thought I was, or tried to be. So I remember having a moment with realizing, okay, I'm in this new city. I don't know anybody. I'm going to be in situations where, like, I'm going to be in a room with people I don't know and people that don't look like me. And also going from like town of less than 3,000 and going to Phoenix, Arizona, there were people around all the time. And that was quite a shock for me at first. But I remember also having a moment of thinking, if I was in a room, say like I was in a lobby waiting for a doctor or whatever, and there were two people in the room with me, and there was a white person and a Black person, that I would have just automatically, like, if I were to talk to any of them, I would talk to the white person first. And I remember having that realization and thinking, that's not cool. Why is that? I don't like that. But also, honestly, not really knowing what to do with it. So I feel like I've had moments of, like, I guess, glimpses of seeing things or noticing the things, like racial differences and stereotypes and ideas, but not really, I guess, having a lot of exposure or opportunity to get to see people differently than how I saw them on TV. Really, that's the only place I saw people that were different from me, was on TV. So I remember having that sort of conflict, I guess. And this was before I came out. I was like probably 18, 19 years old and living in Phoenix. Trying to think how much further I can get before I end, because I am almost at work. But basically, I just wanted to, I guess, share my experience. I feel like maybe that there are other white folk and maybe non-white folk that can see a little bit of their experience, my experience and theirs, and potentially just share how my thinking and my understanding and my perspective began to change over time. So I think I'm probably going to leave that here for today. Hi, Mark. And so I spoke from my childhood, from being a baby, my first nickname being Casper, and then Whitey, my experience with my first Black man as a child, my perception of my whiteness versus brownness as a Mexican, and the quandary of, if I was in a room with a white person and a Black person, I would engage in a conversation with the white person first. As many of you know, tomorrow I'll share a little bit more. I'll come out, I'll be diagnosed with HIV. I'll end up moving back to Idaho and also moving to Chicago. And so there's lots of opportunity for me to see race differently and see people differently than I had once thought before. I think that's what I have to share today. And part 1 of whiteness, and tomorrow morning I'll do the same with whiteness part 2. Yeah, have a great day. Love you all, and bye. Bye, Jason. Thanks for all the love. Maybe try to acknowledge some folks. Hi, Mark, if you're still here. And Mike and Michael, my Idaho sister. I think you're still here as well. Let's see. Hi, Shane. You're an Idahoan too, aren't you? I think you have some Idaho ties. And then there is Mike from Chicago. I'll be talking about Chicago tomorrow. It's good seeing you, Mr. Chico. Hi, Evie. I'm just finishing up this conversation about whiteness because I'm about ready to hop into work. There's a lot of folks just coming in now. I will be doing a part 2 tomorrow. So right around the same time. Hi, Donnie. So I miss Chicago too. So I will see you all tomorrow. Love you, and bye. Bye for reals this time.